Before the world fell in love with her smile, Meg Ryan had already learned how to survive heartbreak, not on screen, but at home. This isn't just the story of a movie star. It's the story of a woman who lost everything the world told her mattered, and still found the one thing it couldn't give peace. Before the world knew her as a movie star, Meg Ryan was already familiar with loss. She was born with a gentle smile that one day would make millions believe in love. But her story began long before Hollywood lights ever found her. People remember her for the warmth she brought to every role, the kind of warmth that could turn an ordinary moment into something unforgettable. Over the years, she became more than just a famous face. She became a reminder that kindness, hope, and love can survive even when life gets hard. Meg's journey is not only about fame or success. It is about how a person can fall, heal, and still rise again. She represents light that never fully fades, even when life tries to dim it. Her story shows that strength is not about never breaking, but about learning to stand again after you do. She turned her pain into purpose, her silence into peace, and her heartbreak into lessons about what it really means to live with grace. This is not a story of a perfect life. It is the story of someone who faced rejection, public judgment, and loneliness, yet never stopped believing in goodness. From her early days in a quiet Connecticut town to the height of fame in Hollywood, and later her long years of retreat and rediscovery, Meg Ryan's path has been filled with both triumph and tears. Every stage of her life reveals something honest about being human. How love can lift us, hurt us, and still shape who we become. She became a symbol of love on screen, but behind that smile was a woman who knew what it felt like to lose home, to lose trust, and to rebuild herself again and again. Her journey is for anyone who has ever felt unseen and hoped that one day their own light would be enough. Because Meg's story isn't about chasing fame, it's about finding peace in the middle of storms. The years would bring applause, awards, heartbreak, and silence. They would test her faith, challenge her worth, and push her toward a kind of peace she had never known before. She has lived through the sweetness of success and the bitterness of judgment, but through it all, she never stopped searching for truth. Her story is proof that even when the light fades, it can still find its way back, softer but stronger than before. Before her name filled theaters, before the laughter of When Harry Met Sally and the magic of Sleepless in Seattle, there was just a girl, quiet, hopeful, and waiting to be seen. Her life became a lesson that love can begin again, no matter how many times it breaks. The years ahead would make her both a legend and a survivor, reminding the world that even the brightest stars are born from the darkest nights. But the story of America's sweetheart didn't begin with applause. It began with goodbye. Some homes echo with laughter, hers echoed with goodbyes. Meg Ryan was born as Margaret Mary Emily Ann Hyra on the 19th of November, 1961, in Fairfield, Connecticut, a small, quiet town where families smiled for church and lawns were always trimmed. From the outside, her childhood looked simple and peaceful, but behind those neat doors was a family slowly falling apart. Her father, Harry Hyra, was a math teacher, disciplined, organized, and calm. Her mother, Susan Jordan, taught English, but dreamed of being an actress. Those two worlds, logic and longing, shaped the walls Meg grew up between. At home, everything seemed in order, but emotions were often locked away. Her father believed love could be shown through responsibility and routine, not through warmth or open words. Her mother carried her own dreams quietly, still hoping the world would remember her passion for the stage. They both cared, but in different ways that didn't meet in the middle. The house was full, with Meg and her 3 siblings, sisters Dana and Annie, and brother Andrew. Yet, it still felt strangely lonely. Dinner conversations were polite, but distant. Her father corrected their grammar. Her mother stared off, as if thinking about a life she never got to live. Meg learned early that silence can be heavy. She often sat quietly, watching, listening, noticing details others missed. It was a habit that would one day make her such a natural actress, the ability to feel deeply but say little. In her heart, she already sensed that love could exist even in rooms where no one spoke it out loud. By the time Meg was 15, her parents' quiet distance had grown into something that could no longer be ignored. Years of unspoken tension and tired compromises had worn them down. The night her father left, there were no screams, no broken plates, no drama, only the dull sound of a suitcase being closed. She remembered the smell of chalk from his school bag and the soft click of the door as he walked out. That sound would stay with her forever. Her father left behind a home still standing but emotionally cracked. Her mother tried to keep everything together, waking up early, grading papers, keeping the house in order, but there was no real warmth left. The air smelled of cold coffee and effort. Meg became the quiet caretaker, helping her younger siblings while pretending she wasn't scared. She learned how to stay calm, even when she wanted to cry. That skill to hide the storm under a calm smile later became the same quality people saw in her performances. She often escaped into her imagination. In notebooks, she wrote little stories about families that didn't fall apart and fathers who always came back. She wasn't dreaming of fame. She was dreaming of peace. Even at that age, she understood that people sometimes love each other deeply and still drift apart. It was a truth she would carry into every role she played, the tenderness of someone who understands heartbreak. Her mother kept trying to find small pieces of her old life. She took theater jobs in local productions, sometimes returning late at night, tired, but holding on to her passion. Meg would wait up for her, pretending to study, just to see her come home safe. Those quiet nights built in her a quiet kind of empathy, the understanding that people break in silence long before they ever show it. The house itself began to change. It no longer smelled like home. It smelled like papers, coffee, and worn-out dreams. Still, Meg stayed strong. She made breakfast for her siblings, helped with homework, and learned how to look fine even when she felt empty inside. It wasn't the kind of suffering that leaves visible scars, but the kind that shapes who you become. She once said in an interview years later, "I think I grew up learning to disappear." The sentence explained everything. How she could lose herself so completely in her characters, how her acting felt real even when the words were scripted. She didn't perform to be seen by millions. She performed because for years she hadn't been seen at all. In those teenage years, she found her strength not in shouting, but in surviving the silence. She learned that kindness is strongest when life is unkind, that gentleness isn't weakness, and that sometimes the people who smile the most have cried the hardest. The cracks in her family taught her compassion, patience, and an understanding of pain that no acting class ever could. When her father left, something in her changed. She no longer believed love was something that stayed. She believed it was something you had to protect. That belief would shape how she loved, how she worked, and how she faced the world. By the time she left Fairfield, she wasn't running away. She was carrying a quiet promise. A promise that the day she would build a life where love wouldn't walk away without saying goodbye. And though she didn't know it yet, the pain that once made her invisible would soon become the reason the whole world couldn't look away. When the house grew silent, she promised herself one day she'd be seen by the whole world. The city didn't notice her, but she noticed everything. When Meg Ryan left Fairfield and stepped into New York City, she carried one suitcase, a borrowed coat, and a quiet determination that even she didn't fully understand yet. The bus dropped her near 34th Street, the air heavy with rain and exhaust. For the first time, she felt small, but also strangely free. The city didn't care who she was or where she came from. That indifference hurt at first, but it also gave her something she had never known before: the chance to become whoever she wanted to be. She enrolled at the University of Connecticut and later transferred to New York University to study journalism. Writing felt safe, logical, and respectable, a career her parents could approve of. But in her free time, she found herself drawn to something else: acting. It started with small theater workshops and local auditions. The stage lights were cheap, and the rooms were cold, but for the first time, she felt visible. When she read lines, people listened. When she cried, it wasn't ignored. Acting wasn't about fame for her. It was about finally being seen and heard after years of silence. Life in New York wasn't easy. Her apartment was small and drafty, with a single window facing an alley. She paid her rent by working at coffee shops, answering phones, and taking odd jobs. Some nights, she skipped dinner just to save enough money for the subway to her next audition. The city could be cruel. Doors slammed, faces turned away. Casting directors said she was too ordinary or not memorable. Every rejection stung, but she smiled anyway, pretending it didn't. Inside, she kept repeating to herself, "Just one, yes, that's all it takes." She spent nights writing letters home that she never sent, not because she was hiding her struggles, but because she didn't want to worry her mother. She'd boil noodles, sit by the window, and whisper her lines to the dark, her breath visible in the cold air. She didn't dream of red carpets. She dreamed of feeling safe, of having a place in the world that wouldn't disappear like her childhood home did. Her first break came in 1981 when she landed a small part in the film Rich and Famous. It wasn't much, just a few lines, but it paid her rent and reminded her that persistence mattered. The feeling of standing in front of a camera, even for seconds, lit something inside her that no rejection could put out. A year later, she auditioned for a soap opera called As the World Turns. The studio lights were blinding, her hands shook, and her voice cracked, but that small imperfection made her real. Days later, she got the call. She had the part. It was a small role, but it changed everything. From 1,982 to 1,984, she worked on the show, learning how to move naturally in front of cameras, how to memorize pages of dialogue, and how to stay calm under pressure. The long hours and constant filming didn't bother her. After all, she was used to hard work. Every morning when she looked in the mirror before going on set, she saw not a rising actress, but a girl proving to herself that she could survive. After leaving the show, she struggled again for a while. The entertainment industry had no shortage of talented faces, and her soft voice and girl-next-door look weren't always what producers wanted. Still, she kept showing up to every audition, every call, every chance. Then, in 1986, a new opportunity appeared. She was offered a small part in Top Gun, playing Carol Bradshaw, the cheerful wife of one of the pilots. Her screen time was short, but her warmth stood out. While the movie was full of noise and jet engines, her presence felt human, genuine, grounded, and comforting. That one role changed how people saw her. Directors began to notice the quiet strength behind her smile. She didn't need to force emotion. She carried it naturally. Viewers remembered her even when she was only on screen for a few minutes. That's when Hollywood started paying attention, though Meg herself didn't believe it yet. Even as success began to appear, she lived simply. Her furniture came from thrift stores, her clothes from second-hand shops. She wrote letters to friends about the strange mix of joy and fear fame brought. The fear wasn't about failing, it was about losing herself. She didn't want to become another Hollywood story. She wanted a life that felt real, one where she could laugh without pretending. Each small success gave her hope, but she never forgot the rejections or the cold nights in her tiny apartment. The struggle had taught her gratitude and empathy qualities that would later make her performances so relatable. Her acting wasn't about pretending to be someone else. It was about understanding them, seeing their pain and love as if it were her own. When Top Gun became a massive success, she realized her life was about to change forever. People started recognizing her in the streets, smiling as if they knew her personally. But the truth was, no one really knew her, not yet. The girl who once whispered lines into the dark had finally stepped into the light. She had found her light, but Hollywood would soon decide how bright she was allowed to shine. In the late 80s, love had a face, and it was hers. After small roles and steady work on television, Meg Ryan reached a turning point with When Harry Met Sally, 1989. The film paired her with Billy Crystal and a sharp script that treated friendship and love with honesty and humor. The diner scene became a pop culture moment, but the real impact was quieter. Audiences felt they knew her. She looked and sounded like someone you could meet in real life, yet she carried a special warmth on screen. The movie was a box office success and made her a leading name. It also set a new standard for romantic comedies, proving that thoughtful talk, timing, and chemistry could be just as powerful as big plots or action. After that, the industry began to see Meg as the center of a certain kind of film. Stories where love grows out of ordinary moments, small coincidences, and honest conversations. She became known for open expressions, clear emotions, and soft humor that felt safe and inviting. Directors trusted her to carry feelings without forcing them. Viewers trusted her too. They believed her characters because she performed with restraint and care. It was not about being glamorous, it was about being real. That quality had roots in her quiet childhood and years of feeling unseen. On screen, she gave the audience the emotional signals they needed: doubt, hope, fear, and joy, all without noise. Sleepless in Seattle, 1993, pushed her to a new level and joined her forever with Tom Hanks in the public imagination. The story kept them apart for most of the film, which meant their connection had to live in small looks, voiceovers, and small decisions. The result showed that chemistry is not only two people in the same room, it is also the feeling that two people understand each other even at a distance. The final scene at the Empire State Building gave the audience a clean release of emotion. People left theaters feeling lighter, and many watched it again on tape and TV for years. The film became a comfort movie, the kind people put on when they needed hope. The pairing with Tom Hanks worked because both actors played decent people who made mistakes and tried to fix them. Neither character needed to be perfect. Both needed to be kind. That balance fit Meg's natural style. She let small details carry weight: a pause before a sentence, a half smile after a hard truth, a steady voice when the character wanted to cry. Those choices made her characters feel close to the audience's own lives. Tom Hanks matched that tone with simple humor and steadiness. Together, they built a believable trust on screen, and that trust turned into a brand that was bigger than any single film. You've Got Mail, 1998, updated the formula for a new time. Email and chat were fresh, and the idea that two people could build connection through words fit Meg perfectly. Her character, a small bookstore owner, stood for memory and personal touch in a time of big business. The film showed the softer side of a changing world and made online communication feel warm, not cold. Again, the success depended on her small choices: reading an email with quiet joy, holding back tears in a closing scene, choosing forgiveness in a moment when anger would be easier. The movie gave audiences permission to believe that technology could still protect tenderness. Many people still quote lines from it and use it as a winter comfort film. Across these films, Meg Ryan shaped a new idea of the romantic lead. She was not distant or idealized. She was present, specific, and human. Her characters had jobs, friends, and private worries. They listened more than they talked. They trusted their feelings without turning them into speeches. Over time, this approach changed expectations for romantic comedies. Studios looked for characters who were grounded, Scripts tried to sound like real conversations instead of perfect dialogue. Other actors followed this path, but Meg's version remains the reference point for many viewers because she connected without pushing. With success came a cost. The public began to treat her screen image as her true self. Magazines called her America's sweetheart, a label that brought love and pressure in equal measure. Fans expected her to be gentle, cheerful, and pure. Casting teams wanted the same character again and again. When an actor becomes a symbol, their choices narrow. If they change, people say they betrayed the symbol. If they repeat, people say they are limited. Meg faced that trap during the 1,990 seconds as offers centered on similar roles. She accepted many because they were strong stories and because audiences clearly wanted her there. But inside that pattern, a quiet tension grew. The burden was not just about roles, it was also about constant visibility. Her face was on posters and magazine covers. Reporters asked about her personal life as if it were another scene to play. Every public appearance was treated like a sign of who she really was. The more people loved the image, the harder it became to live as a private person. This is where the idea of perfection started to weigh on her. The industry encouraged her to remain the same hair, the same tone, the same softness. But an artist needs room to grow. A person needs room to change. That gap between what the public wanted and what she felt became a growing strain. Even inside the romantic comedy lane, Meg tried to find edges. In some films, she played characters who were defensive, sarcastic, or quietly sad. She looked for moments where love was not neat, missed timing, mixed signals, and choices that carried a cost. She also took on roles outside the usual frame, testing drama and conflict to avoid repeating herself. These steps were important because they showed that the sweetheart label was too small for the full range of her ability. But labels are sticky. Media often pulled her back to the same frame, praising her most when she fit the image and questioning her when she did not. Her success also changed the market for women-led films. The steady performance of these titles taught studios that stories about women's interior lives could be profitable. Soundtracks, holiday re-releases, and TV reruns kept the films alive for years. Many later romantic comedies borrowed structure and tone from her work, including the slow-burn friendship to love path and the final meeting in a meaningful place. Younger actors mention her as a model for how to play sincerity without losing intelligence. In short, she helped define a genre and a generation's idea of how love looks and sounds on screen. At the same time, public ownership of her image made small life events feel large in the press. A haircut became a headline. A quiet week became a rumor. A serious role became a risk rather than a normal choice for a working actor. This kind of attention makes it hard to take chances. If every change is judged as a threat to the brand, growth slows. Meg kept working, but the outside noise grew louder, and the margin for error felt smaller. The audience still loved her, but the love came with rules. By the end of the 1,990 seconds, she had completed a remarkable run. Multiple hits, a trusted screen partnership with Tom Hanks, and a people-dasness, the strong place in film history. People felt closer to each other because of the movies she made. Couples used lines from her films in toasts and proposals. Friends watched her movies together when they needed comfort. This is a rare kind of cultural impact. It does not shout, it stays. Yet, under that steady glow, there was a human being who wanted to stretch and change, to try new tones, and to be allowed mistakes without losing everything she had built. The next years would test that wish. They would test how far a person could push against a public idea without breaking it, and how much kindness the industry could offer a woman who had given it so much. The work had made her visible. The love had made her iconic. But icon status comes with a shadow. People stop seeing the person and start seeing the symbol. That is the point where joy can turn into pressure, and pressure can turn into pain. Her skills had brought her to the top. Now, she had to protect herself at the top. But the same smile that made the world fall in love would soon become the mask she couldn't remove. Fame builds pedestals faster than it builds mercy. After years of being Hollywood's favorite symbol of love, Meg Ryan began to search for something deeper. She had spent most of the 1,990 seconds smiling for the world, giving warmth and optimism to millions of people. But inside, she felt the weight of constantly being perfect. By 1994, she wanted to prove that she was more than the cheerful romantic lead audiences adored. That year, she took a major risk with When a Man Loves a Woman, playing Alice Green, a wife and mother battling alcoholism. It was her most serious role to date, showing pain, shame, and the struggle to stay alive within a broken home. The movie shocked people who were used to seeing her as lighthearted and idealistic. In one emotional scene, she cried so hard the set fell silent, and it wasn't just acting, the pain came from somewhere real. Critics praised her honesty, calling it one of her best performances, but the film didn't fit the image that made her famous. It was too raw, too human, and Hollywood didn't know where to place her anymore. Still, Meg had found a new kind of truth in her work. She followed it with Courage Under Fire in 1996, a war drama where she played a helicopter pilot accused of cowardice. She cut her hair short, spoke with precision, and stripped away all softness from her screen persona. She wanted to be seen as an actor, not an idea. For a few years, that seriousness gave her balance. She worked hard, cared for her family, and stayed away from the chaos of gossip. But in 2000, everything changed. While filming Proof of Life with actor Russell Crowe, rumors of an affair began to spread. At the time, Meg was still married to actor Dennis Quaid, and the tabloids turned her private pain into a public show. Paparazzi followed her everywhere. Headlines screamed betrayal, and talk shows tore her apart. For the first time, the woman, who represented romance and purity, was being painted as the opposite. She never spoke much about what really happened. Later, she admitted that her marriage had already been broken long before that film. Dennis wasn't faithful for a long time, she said quietly years later, but the public didn't want explanations. They wanted a story to punish. The same audience that once adored her now watched for her mistakes. Every photo, every silence, every expression became proof of guilt. The film itself, which cost $90 million to make, barely covered its budget. Critics dismissed it, and the scandal overshadowed everything. In interviews, she appeared calm, but friends said she was deeply hurt by the sudden cruelty. Hollywood is quick to celebrate innocence, but even quicker to condemn imperfection. For a woman whose career had been built on gentleness, the backlash was brutal. Offers began to slow down. Reporters asked invasive questions. Every new project was compared to her old image. She said once, "They crowned me queen, then tore down the throne." By 2003, Meg decided to speak again, hoping to show her real self. She agreed to appear on The Michael Parkinson Show in the UK, expecting a thoughtful interview. Instead, she faced sharp, uncomfortable questions about her private life and her decision to act in the Cut, a darker, more mature film that included intimate scenes. Parkinson pressed her about those choices, implying that she had gone too far. Meg sat quietly, eyes steady, shoulders tight. When he interrupted her again, she said softly, "Wrap it up," unclipped her microphone, and walked off the stage. The next day, the press called her rude, arrogant, and unstable. They replayed the clip again and again, stripping away her dignity for ratings. Few noticed that she had been pushed into discomfort. They only saw a woman refusing to smile. In truth, that moment was not anger, it was exhaustion. She had spent 2 decades being polite, graceful, and accommodating. Now, for once, she had chosen self-respect over performance, and the world punished her for it. Later, she said, "That moment taught me how expensive honesty can be." After that, Meg quietly stepped away. There were no big announcements, no public statements, just a slow fading from the spotlight. The woman who once filled theaters with laughter now avoided cameras entirely. She turned down roles, canceled interviews, and disappeared into her own life. She focused on raising her son Jack and creating a small, private world where she could breathe again. To many, it looked like she had fallen. But to those close to her, it was something else: recovery. Behind closed doors, she was learning how to exist without applause. She wrote, read, and spent time with people who didn't care about fame. It was a long process of rebuilding her confidence after being torn apart in public. For nearly a decade, she chose peace over attention. She later said, It wasn't hiding. I was healing." Hollywood moved on, but her fans never fully forgot her. They remembered her warmth, her kindness, and the way she made ordinary love feel special. But Meg wasn't trying to return yet. She was learning how to live without needing to be loved by millions. That lesson would become one of the most important chapters of her life. Her withdrawal also became a quiet protest, a refusal to let others define her worth. In an industry that feeds on visibility, her silence became powerful. People speculated, but she stayed calm. The woman who once represented America's dreams of love had decided to fall in love with her own peace instead. By the time the gossip faded, she was no longer the same person. The experience had changed her. The fame that once felt like light had burned too bright, and now she understood the value of shadows. Fame had given her everything: recognition, wealth, admiration, but it had also taken her privacy, her trust, and sometimes her joy. The years that followed were quiet but meaningful. She stayed close to her family, learned to cook, took long walks, and rediscovered what made her happy. There were no scripts or red carpets, but there was healing. She began to realize that silence, the same thing that once made her feel invisible, could now be a form of peace. The cameras turned away, but in the darkness she found something rarer than fame's silence. When applause fades, the echo can either haunt you or heal you. After years of fame, judgment, and exhaustion, Meg Ryan chose silence. It wasn't a planned retirement or a dramatic exit. She simply stopped showing up. One project after another disappeared from her schedule until her name was no longer on any movie poster. The cameras turned their lenses toward younger stars, and for the first time in decades, Meg felt relief instead of loss. She no longer had to smile for headlines or pretend to be fine. What she wanted most now was a quiet, ordinary life, one that belonged to her and no one else. In those first few years away from Hollywood, she focused on her son, Jack Quaid. He had been born in 1992, during the peak of her career, but she had often been pulled between motherhood and film sets. Now, she finally had time to just be his mom. Their days became simple: making breakfast, helping with homework, and walking in the park without being followed. Jack had her sense of humor and his father's confidence. He didn't care about fame, he cared about her being there. She once said, "Those were the most peaceful mornings of my life. Coffee, sunlight, and my son laughing in the kitchen." Without scripts or press tours, life slowed down. Meg started writing, reading, and spending time with close friends who knew her before the fame. She stayed in New York, far from Los Angeles, because the city gave her the kind of anonymity she needed. On crowded streets, she could blend in. She shopped for groceries, took long walks, and rediscovered the small joys most people take for granted. It wasn't glamorous, but it was real. Then, in 2006, something extraordinary happened. After years of living quietly, Meg decided to adopt a baby girl from China. It wasn't a sudden decision. It came from years of reflection and an inner longing to love and nurture again. The process was long and emotional. filled with paperwork, waiting, and travel. When she finally flew to China, she described the feeling as nervous calm, like standing on the edge of something life-changing. The orphanage was quiet, filled with soft cries and gentle caretakers. When they placed the baby in her arms for the first time, Meg froze. She said later that the world felt still, no cameras, no applause, just a small, warm weight against her heart. The baby's hand wrapped around her finger, and Meg started crying before she could even speak. She named her Daisy True Ryan, because daisies bloom where others fade, and truth was the only thing she wanted left in her life. She would later say, "I thought I was saving her, but she saved me." Bringing Daisy home changed everything. The house that once felt too quiet was now filled with laughter, toys, and late-night lullabies. There were sleepless nights, bottles to warm, and endless small messes, and Meg loved every bit of it. She didn't have assistants or nannies doing the work. She did it herself. She wanted to be fully present. Friends who visited said she had never looked calmer. She no longer measured success by premieres or ratings, but by the sound of her daughter's laughter and the warmth of home. Her days began early with Daisy's giggles and ended with bedtime stories. She became part of her local community, attending school events and volunteering quietly for children's causes. For the first time since childhood, her life was not built on performance. She could wear no makeup, carry groceries, or sit on a park bench without anyone expecting a quote or a photo. It was a new kind of freedom, one she had earned through pain. The bond with Daisy deepened over the years. Meg said in one interview, "She gave me the purest kind of love, the kind that doesn't care who you are or what you've done, just that you're there." It was through motherhood that she learned what peace really felt like. Watching Daisy grow reminded her that life doesn't need to be loud to be meaningful. The lessons she once tried to find through fame were now unfolding in everyday moments: a walk to school, a drawing on the fridge, a sleepy hug before bed. While Meg stayed away from Hollywood, her absence made her legend grow. People still spoke of her as if she had retired into mystery. But for her, it wasn't about disappearing. It was about finding balance. She knew that fame had once taken everything from her privacy, rest, and trust, and she wasn't going to give it that power again. These quiet years were not empty. They were full of healing, patience, and new beginnings. Jack was now growing into adulthood, and watching him follow in her footsteps as an actor made her proud. He joined the industry with roles in shows like The Boys, proving his own talent independent of his parents. Meg supported him quietly, always reminding him to stay humble and true to himself. At home, Daisy's childhood filled her days with joy and purpose. Between the two of them, she found a kind of happiness that fame could never offer. Meg once said that during those years, she finally stopped running. She learned to be okay with silence, with slow mornings and quiet nights. Sometimes she would sit by the window after putting Daisy to bed, tea in hand, watching the city lights flicker in the distance. It reminded her that peace isn't about isolation, it's about being content in your own space. She had lost so much under the spotlight, but in her small, simple home, she found herself again. The applause had faded, the cameras had gone, and what remained was something stronger, real love. Not the kind written into scripts or acted out for millions, but the kind that grows naturally, quietly, and endlessly. For Meg Ryan, motherhood was not a chapter of retreat, but a rebirth. Through Jack, she rediscovered pride. Through Daisy, she rediscovered hope. Together, they filled her life with meaning that no headline could measure. The woman who once embodied cinematic love now lived it in its truest form: unconditional, patient, and real. But even peace has visitors, and one of them would be love, knocking again when she least expected it. She wasn't searching for love, but love has a way of finding what's still open. After years of heartbreak and recovery, Meg Ryan wasn't looking for anyone. Her life revolved around her 2 children, her small circle of friends, and the calm routine she had built. The chaos of her past relationships and the harsh glare of fame had made her cautious. She wasn't bitter, just tired. Yet, sometimes, love arrives quietly, without planning, and that's how it happened. In the early 2000s, a friend introduced her to actor John Cusack. Both were private, both had been through years of public attention, and both were learning how to start over. They met for coffee on a gray afternoon in New York. Meg later said it felt easy from the beginning. No pressure, no expectations, just 2 people who understood what it meant to be tired of pretending. They walked for hours through the streets, unnoticed by most. He was thoughtful and funny in a quiet way, and she laughed more than she had in a long time. For someone who had been judged for every word and expression, being with him felt simple. Their relationship wasn't built on grand gestures. They shared small, ordinary things, late-night movies, long drives, and dinners cooked together at home. They didn't talk much about work. Instead, they spoke about books, music, and their children. John respected her silence, and Meg appreciated that he never tried to fix her or pull her back into fame. It was a peaceful companionship, more like a deep friendship than a whirlwind romance. For a while, it seemed like exactly what both needed. But sometimes, even gentle love can't erase the weight of old wounds. By 2003, the comfort between them started turning into distance. John wanted something more structured. Meg wanted to stay free. He was ready for commitment, but she still needed space to heal. Their calls became shorter, their meetings less frequent. They cared for each other deeply, but their lives were moving in different directions. The last time she saw him, it was on a rainy afternoon in Soho. He waved, smiled, and walked away, disappearing into the crowd. She didn't chase after him. She later said, "We were both healing, just not together." That goodbye didn't hurt the way her past heartbreaks had. It taught her that not every ending needs to break you, some simply fade into peace. Meg began to understand that love doesn't always have to last forever to matter. Some people come to remind you that you're still capable of feeling. John was one of those people. He helped her believe that softness wasn't weakness, and that even after all the noise, there was still room in her heart for kindness. Years later, another unexpected connection appeared. In 2010, she met musician John Mellencamp. He was a rock legend, rough-edged but sincere, carrying the marks of his own long, complicated life. He had been married 3 times and wasn't looking for anything serious. Meg, too, had stopped expecting romance. But when they met, there was an instant understanding between them. 2 people who had lived through chaos and still had a little hope left. Their relationship grew quietly. They spent time between New York and Indiana, where John lived. He hated city noise. She loved it. She wrote, he painted, and made music. They were different in almost every way, but somehow it worked. She said, "We didn't need to pretend with each other. It wasn't perfect, it was just real." Their love wasn't about red carpets or attention. It was private and grounded, built on shared simplicity. But love also has geography. John felt at home in small towns, on porches with guitars and open skies. Meg needed the rhythm of New York, the bookstores, the energy, the early morning walks through quiet streets. The distance between those worlds slowly became the space between them. They broke up, got back together, and broke up again. Each time, they tried to bridge the gap, but the truth was simple. They belonged to different kinds of peace. In 2018, after years of trying, John proposed. Meg accepted with a small smile and posted a simple sketch of 2 stick figures holding hands with the word "engaged" written above. The world celebrated, but she stayed quiet about it. There was no big announcement, no photo shoot, just that one sweet image. It showed that she still believed in love, but this time without needing to prove it. By 2019, the engagement ended. There was no scandal, no bitterness, just quiet acceptance. Meg later said, "We loved each other, we just didn't fit, and that's okay." It was one of the clearest truths she had ever spoken. For a woman whose public image had once been tied to perfect love stories, her words carried wisdom. She had learned that real love isn't measured by forever, it's measured by honesty. After the breakup, she didn't fall apart. She returned to her peaceful routines, writing in the mornings, spending evenings with Daisy, and enjoying the calm she had built. She stayed friends with John Mellencamp and still listened to his songs, describing them once as forgiveness set to music. Her understanding of love had changed completely. It was no longer about rescue or passion. It was about truth and presence. Those who saw her during those years said she seemed lighter, almost relieved. She didn't chase affection, and she didn't hide either. She had reached a stage where love, for her, meant freedom, the freedom to care deeply, but let go when it stopped growing. By the time she turned 60, Meg no longer spoke about heartbreak as loss. She spoke about it as part of living, a reminder that we are still capable of feeling. Love had taught her pain, but it had also taught her grace. Every person who came into her life had left her a little wiser, a little softer, and a little more sure of who she was. The world would soon see her again, changed, but unbroken. The cruelest lens isn't the camera, it's time, magnified by gossip. As the years passed, Meg Ryan began facing a new kind of scrutiny, one that every woman in Hollywood eventually meets: the judgment of age. After living quietly for years, her rare public appearances started drawing harsh comments. Tabloids published side-by-side photos, comparing her younger and older self, treating time like a crime she had committed. Strangers online speculated about her face, her choices, and her life, as if aging itself were something she owed the public an explanation for. For a woman who once represented youth, romance, and light, the change in tone was cruel. The same industry that had once adored her now dissected her image piece by piece. But Meg handled it differently this time. She didn't rush to defend herself or give interviews to clarify rumors. She had learned that sometimes silence protects you better than words. When asked about it later, she simply said, "Aging is a privilege not everyone gets." It was a soft, powerful response that stopped the noise without anger. She wasn't denying time, she was embracing it. Her beauty had changed, yes, but it had transformed into something deeper, the kind that carries stories, wisdom, and peace. In truth, Meg had been living with quiet challenges the public never saw. Arthritis had begun to affect her movement, making long days painful and certain gestures difficult. But she never used it as an excuse. She kept walking, swimming, and staying active, refusing to let her body's limits define her spirit. Those who knew her said she often woke early to stretch, practice yoga, or take short walks in the Montecito Hills before sunrise. To outsiders, she seemed calm. To those close to her, she was quietly fighting every day to stay strong. Then came the night that reminded everyone who she really was: the 2025 Academy Awards. It was her first major appearance in years. As she stepped onto the red carpet, the world paused. Cameras flashed wildly, capturing a face marked not by perfection, but by grace. She moved slowly, with a slight limp, but her head was held high. The golden light from the stage reflected off her gown, and for a moment, it felt like the entire room softened. People whispered, "She looks different," but others said, "She looks real." Beneath the elegant dress and polished hair was a woman who had survived the full cycle of fame, its rise, its cruelty, and its silence, and still returned with dignity. Behind that appearance was strength few people knew about. Arthritis had made some days unbearable. Standing for long periods brought pain, but she did it anyway. Each step down that carpet was deliberate, controlled, and brave. When she presented her award that night, her voice was steady and warm. There was no sign of bitterness or fear, only peace. The applause she received wasn't for the roles she once played. It was for the courage of simply standing there, unafraid to be seen as she was. That night, Meg reminded the world of something Hollywood often forgets. Beauty isn't about age, it's about presence. The lines on her face carried the weight of decades lived fully of laughter, heartbreak, motherhood, and endurance. Her eyes, still bright, no longer needed to prove youth. They reflected wisdom. She had stopped being America's sweetheart and become something far more powerful, a woman who had made peace with herself. Even before her public reappearance, Meg had already begun to find her way back to art on her own terms. In 2015, she directed her first film, Ithaca. It was based on the 1943 novel The Human Comedy, and she cast her son Jack in it. The movie wasn't made for fame or box office numbers. It was an act of love. She described it as a bridge between who I was and who I am. The story about a young man delivering messages during wartime mirrored her own life lessons about loss, endurance, and the small beauties that keep people going. Watching Jack act gave her a sense of continuity, as if her own passion had passed into safer hands. Directing suited her. It allowed her to express without being seen, to shape emotion from behind the camera instead of in front of it. She didn't chase reviews or attention. What mattered was the process of the quiet satisfaction of telling a story honestly. Years later, she returned again with What Happens Later, 2023, a film she wrote, directed, and starred in. It was a gentle romantic story about two ex-lovers meeting again after years apart. The film wasn't a comeback, it was a statement. Meg had nothing left to prove. She had found peace in creation itself. In interviews around that time, she said, "I don't chase the light anymore. I make it." That sentence captured the essence of her journey. A woman once consumed by fame, now creating meaning for herself on her own schedule, without anyone's permission. She had come full circle, from the young girl searching for safety to the woman who built her own peace. People who worked with her on What Happens Later said she was patient, precise, and deeply kind. She encouraged everyone on set to slow down and take care of themselves, reminding them that film should be about joy, not exhaustion. That attitude came from experience, from knowing how easily the pressure of performance can crush a person's spirit. She had been there, and she wasn't going back. Away from film, her life in Montecito became a reflection of balance. Her mornings were simple tea, yoga, music, and time with her dog. She spent afternoons writing or reading by the window, overlooking the ocean. Her home, surrounded by oak trees and lavender, became her retreat. Friends said she rarely spoke about fame. She spoke about peace, art, and her children. Public judgment still surfaced occasionally, but she no longer cared. She didn't owe the world explanations. She had already learned that the harshest critics fade faster than genuine kindness. She lived quietly, smiled easily, and carried herself with the calm of someone who had survived everything that once tried to define her. Meg's story had always been about love, love for others, love for her work, and, finally, love for herself. The industry that once tried to box her into an image had lost its hold. Now, she was her own kind of artist, independent, reflective, and free. Her beauty no longer needed applause. It existed simply because she was still here, living, breathing, creating. The world that once watched her for her smile now began to respect her for her strength. The woman who once symbolized lightness had become an emblem of quiet resilience. She had learned that time doesn't take beauty away. It reveals what's real underneath it. She no longer chased the light, she made it. Even her homes tell the same story. Break, rebuild, fill with light. Meg Ryan's wealth was never about excess. It was the quiet result of years of steady work, long days on set, and careful choices. At the height of her career in the 1992 and early 2000s, She was one of the highest-paid actresses in Hollywood, earning over $10 million per film. Over time, those years of success built her financial foundation. Yet, unlike many stars of her generation, Meg never turned her fortune into a display. Her money didn't scream. It whispered in well-loved homes, calm spaces, and lives quietly changed through generosity. Her real estate decisions became a reflection of her inner journey. In Montecito, California, she owns a peaceful estate of nearly 2 acres, surrounded by old oak trees and a view of the Pacific. The house itself, a Mediterranean-style mansion of around 6,700 square feet, feels less like a statement and more like a sanctuary. Inside, there's warmth rather than glamour. Soft light, wooden beams, and open windows that let the breeze move freely through the rooms. She spends her mornings there in quiet routines, often reading or writing near the window that faces the garden. Friends say the space feels exactly like her, simple, elegant, and full of calm. Over the years, Meg bought and renovated several homes across the country, not for investment alone, but for creation. She was known for transforming spaces, keeping the structure but changing the spirit. From her $5 million Bel Air mansion that she sold for double its price to her Manhattan loft, purchased for $4.6 million and sold for nearly $10 million, every renovation carried her signature. She restored, softened, and renewed. Her philosophy was clear: take something that's been neglected, keep what's strong, and bring it back to life. In a way, each house mirrored her personal evolution, taking the pain of the past and rebuilding it with light. Her car collection reflected the same quiet taste: no flashy sports cars or luxury convoys, just timeless classics that offered comfort and grace. Her Mercedes-Benz S-Class remains her favorite, a smooth, silent ride she calls her moving sanctuary. For weekends, she prefers her BMW 530i, simple but powerful, ideal for the winding coastal roads near her home. And when family visits, her Cadillac Escalade is the one she drives, spacious and welcoming, with coffee and music always ready inside. For Meg, possessions were never about showing power, they were about creating peace. Even with all her success, she stayed remarkably disciplined. She handled her finances carefully, worked with a small team she trusted for decades, and avoided unnecessary publicity around her wealth. Her estimated net worth today is over $85 million, but it's not something she ever talks about. What she values most isn't the money itself, it's what it allows her to do quietly behind the scenes. Philanthropy became one of the cornerstones of her later life, though she rarely spoke about it. Through the Meg and Bennett Goodman Family Foundation, she has contributed over $25 million to educational, healthcare, and social programs. One of her biggest focuses is Year Up, an organization that provides career and technical training to underprivileged youth. She has also supported reproductive health programs in Africa and small medical initiatives in Arizona, but she does it without photo ops or press releases. Those close to her say she believes true charity doesn't need to be seen, it just needs to be done. Her giving also extends to creative mentorship. In recent years, she has quietly supported young filmmakers, offering advice, script notes, and sometimes even small funding for independent projects. Many of them never mention her name publicly, out of respect for her wish to stay out of the spotlight. She believes in passing down experience without control, letting others find their voice the way she once found hers. As Meg's life slowed down, her priorities became clear. She didn't want to be remembered as a movie star alone. She wanted to be remembered as someone who made things better: homes, people, and hearts. When asked in an interview how she defines success now, she said, "It's when you can go to sleep with a quiet mind." That sentence summed up her journey perfectly. She had gone from chasing applause to choosing peace, from being seen by millions to being truly known by a few. The way she manages her life today reflects her balance between comfort and simplicity. She still travels, but prefers small, meaningful trips to visit friends, see her children, or explore new art exhibits. She enjoys cooking, gardening, and reading more than attending events. Her home is filled with books, photographs, and memories rather than awards. Each wall holds reminders of where she's been, but none of them feel heavy. She has learned to live surrounded by beauty without needing it to prove anything. Meg's quiet empire isn't built on luxury, it's built on peace. It's the result of decades spent learning what truly matters, not fame or image, but stability, kindness, and legacy. Her wealth gave her the chance to live freely, but her heart gave that wealth meaning. She uses it to help others, to rebuild what's broken, and to show that success doesn't need to shout to be real. Today, she lives surrounded by the calm she once longed for. The same woman who once ran from cameras now spends afternoons watering her plants, walking her dog, and enjoying family dinners. The fame that once defined her no longer controls her. What remains is grace, quiet, earned, and lasting. But her truest legacy isn't made of walls or wealth. It's the way she taught the world to love, even in silence. Legends don't fade, they transform into the glow that guides others home. Meg Ryan's story doesn't end with the applause of her past, but with the quiet strength she carries today. Time has softened her fame, but deepened her meaning. She no longer lives for cameras or headlines. She lives for calm mornings, family, and the peace she once chased through fame. The woman who once defined cinematic love has now become a symbol of endurance, teaching that life after the spotlight can still be full of light. Her journey stands as proof that resilience isn't about never falling, it's about how gently you rise. She faced criticism, heartbreak, and silence, yet never let bitterness take root. Each phase of her life carved a new layer of wisdom. When fame tried to claim her, she stepped away. When pain tried to silence her, she turned it into compassion. When age tried to define her, she redefined beauty on her own terms. That quiet courage is what makes her story timeless. People often ask what keeps her grounded after so many years in the public eye. The answer is simple: gratitude. Meg doesn't speak of achievements. She speaks of blessings, her children, her home, her peace. She has learned that success isn't measured by applause, but by how calm your heart feels when the room goes quiet. Once, she chased perfection. Now, she chooses presence. Once, she worked to be adored. Now, she works to be content. The world remembers her for the laughter she brought, but the accent dove. Truth is that her real legacy lies in her gentleness. In an industry built on noise, she stayed soft. In a culture obsessed with youth, she aged with honesty. Her story reminds people that kindness outlasts popularity, and peace outshines perfection. Even at 63, she continues to inspire not through fame, but through example. She shows that a woman can step out of the spotlight and still shine just as bright, if not brighter, in her own quiet way. Her children remain at the heart of her life. Jack has grown into a respected actor with his own path, and Daisy is a thoughtful young woman finding her voice in the world. Meg calls them her greatest work. The love she gives them is steady, unconditional, and humble, a reflection of everything she has learned about what matters most. Her home is no longer a stage, but a haven filled with laughter, coffee, books, and sunlight. She still writes, still reads, still dreams. Some mornings, she walks by the ocean, taking in the air with the same calm focus she once brought to her performances. There are no more roles to chase or expectations to meet. Her life now is about peace, quiet mornings, meaningful conversations, and time spent with those she loves. She has become a picture of balance, showing that peace is not something that arrives suddenly. It's something you build carefully, one choice at a time. To the people who grew up watching her, Meg Ryan remains more than an actress. She is a reminder of a gentler time. Her films were about hope, about the belief that love could heal what life had broken. Now, her own life teaches that love can take many forms: friendship, motherhood, forgiveness, and self-acceptance. Even when the world forgets to be kind, she proves that grace still exists. If there is one message her story gives, it's that peace is greater than applause. The applause fades, but peace stays. Fame gives attention, peace gives meaning. And that is what she has built, a life that no longer needs validation to feel full. So, when people look back at her legacy, it isn't the movies alone that define her. It's the journey of a woman who faced the hardest parts of being human: heartbreak, judgment, and aging, and turned them into something beautiful. She reminds us that strength can be quiet, love can be simple, and success can mean just waking up grateful for another day. Meg Ryan's light hasn't dimmed, it has matured. It no longer flashes, it glows steady, warm, and real. She has become the kind of legend who doesn't need to perform anymore because her life itself tells the story. To those who watched her rise, fall, and rise again, her journey is not just inspiring, it's healing. It reminds every person that they too can begin again, no matter where they are in life. Because every time her light flickers, somewhere in the dark, another soul remembers how to rise.